At 23 years old, Isaac French was managing a $6 million construction project. He had the title, the paycheck, the path laid out, but something was missing. He'd stare at blueprints designed by someone else and think, what if we did it differently? The creativity, the design, the experience, none of it was his, so he made a bold move. During the quiet stillness of COVID, he found a plot of land near a lake in Waco, Texas, and saw something no one else did: the start of a hospitality business built around moments, not just money. 1 year later, over $1 million in revenue, $500,000 in profit, and a brand with 260,000 followers.
What started as a $20,000 investment, we hit $1 million in revenue in just year one. And that's because it was not about scale, it was about strategy. We net $550,000 in profit in that first 12 months, and I didn't even hire an architect. You don't need a massive budget to win in hospitality. The moment I stopped trying to compete on price and started focusing on the experience, our revenue tripled.
This is Ryan Atkinson, and you're listening to the UpFlip Podcast, where we uncover the secrets of building and running successful businesses. I am so excited to welcome Isaac French to the show today. He has built such an incredible business and excited to talk about doing the same in hospitality in general. So Isaac, thank you so much for being here.
Ryan, it's a pleasure to be.
It's going to be great. And let's really wind back the clock just to lay the foundation for all the listeners here. Take us back to the moment when you saw empty land in Waco during COVID. What did you see that made you think this is it?
Yeah, so just a little bit of context. I had grown up working in construction, and as you mentioned, when I was 22, 23, was running multi-million-dollar projects, very industrious family, and we were always building stuff from the time we were 6 and 7 on. So I had that experience, but when the Live Oak Lake opportunity came along, I was actually self-employed as a bookkeeper, earning about 40 grand a year. And, I really felt like I had all these passions, and I was very artistic at heart and wanted, as you mentioned, to build a project that I could kind of control the outcome in the design, the creative aspects as well. And so I had this idea to create this village of cabins, and I really didn't see anything else like this in the country, really anywhere that I'd ever seen. And so I just started looking for land diligently, really just nothing super complicated on Zillow, really. And one morning happened to stumble across this 5.5 acre parcel that was just a briar infested jungle that I had driven by 100+ times and never thought anything of. But one of the thumbnail photos showed this little muddy cow pond in the middle. It wasn't even a lake. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that was there. And so I drove over. So 6 hours after the property had been listed, I was on site with the listing agent and just had chills from that first moment when I stepped on. I saw these 2 or 3 massive legacy live oak trees. And I just felt like this is a hidden gem and we could really polish this into something that's remarkable. And so got under contract that day and we were off to the races.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. Let's talk about going off to the races here. You get the contract, you sign it. You're like, okay, let's actually move forward with this. What was like those first investments or those first steps you took to like really bring this to life?
So first call I made was to my dad and my brothers to tell them, and they knew I was kind of searching out this idea. But at 24 years old, self-employed with $40,000 of income coming in, I knew I wouldn't be very bankable. So I was going to try to find somebody to at least co-sign on a loan for me. And we negotiated, but they agreed. And, my next call was banks. And I got told no, I got laughed at. I mean, it was one thing after another, as you can imagine. But finally, I found this local community bank here in Waco that agreed to take a risk. And my dad was a personal guarantor, and I got a construction loan for 80% of the value. That whole process ended up taking about 4 months. So in the meantime, I didn't let any grass grow under my feet. Day 2 and 3, I was on site at Live Oak Lake, just walking every square inch of that place to try to understand the topography, the lay of the land, and let the land speak to me as far as what we should build there and how many cabins and what type and how they should be oriented. And so I was really like building a site plan from the ground up. And thankfully, we were outside of the city limits, so there wasn't a lot of regulation. And so I didn't even really need engineers for any of it. I just kind of, with my construction experience, started designing and literally scribbling on an iPad with a drone shot. Came up with a plan. We ended up closing on that land 30 days after, that first day. It was a 30-day cash close. And so we were rocking and rolling, and I was able to get some temporary investment I also had about $20,000 saved up, but basically poured every penny I had into kind of that initial horizontal phase where we were clearing. The day after we closed, I was on site with a chainsaw in hand and burning brush and mulching. We started digging trenches, laying utilities, and really just, bet the farm because, again, the loan process took 4 months. So we were working that entire time. We ended up spending about $300,000 without any guarantee of a loan. But I was like, we're going to get a loan one way or another. And I just had that confidence and it ended up coming through.
I want to ask, was this fearful at all? I mean, you're 24 years old, you're getting loans, you're getting family involved in this process at all. I mean, talk to us about 24-year-old Isaac. Were you scared at all during this?
No, I don't think fear ever really entered my radar. I was just too busy and too high on adrenaline, to be honest. I'd been really, in some ways, preparing my whole life for that moment because all of my experiences previously had really equipped me with all of the skills that I needed, not to be the expert at it, but to get the answers I needed and to execute. And so I didn't have time to be scared. I mean, I was working 80 hours a week. And I should also mention, within a few weeks of that, I bought a 5-acre piece of property 10 minutes down the road with another loan from a different bank I was able to find. This loan was easier to get because it was for a spec house that they could understand better, and built a $500,000 spec home in 4.5 months and sold that for $700,000 in 5 months. So I was able to roll all of that profit into Live Oak Lake. But between those two projects, the workload was excruciating. And yet it was a blast because I was doing what I loved. And so then it's not really work. So I didn't really have time to be scared.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Listeners, stay tuned because we are going to dive into how you can build a hospitality business. Before we do that, Isaac, I think it would help to really paint the picture for our listeners about what Live Oak was and what was there. So talk to us more about the cabins you had there. Talk to us about this lake, the experiences you provided, and then we're going to dive into how someone can replicate that. So stay tuned, listeners. But Isaac, take us from there.
Yeah. So to make the construction story a long story short, it took us 9.5 months start to finish. What we ended up with was 7 very beautifully designed Nordic-inspired cabins, about 500 square feet apiece, nestled around the lake in the trees. The lake is about 2 acres, so it's not really a lake, but the shape of it, we ended up digging out that pond and adding aerators, making it all beautiful, landscaping the entire property just spectacularly. There's walking trails, there's kayaking and fishing. It created a commons area with a pergola and a shipping container turned into a swimming pool with a 10-foot window cut in the side that's on the edge of the lake. It's really, really beautiful. Everything from when you pull up, the first impressions, the gate, the lighting, the plants, the winding pathways, the signage, it's all been thought through. And it's just a million little details that have all been executed, and they come together and create this magical experience. And so when guests would come on site, they would tell me all the time, it felt like we were going to a different world. It just felt transportive, it was magical. And so that was the best compliment ever. And so it was this whole European kind of Nordic vibe that we just kind of transplanted into this little oasis in Texas. And then of course we had some hospitality layered into that as well. So I was very averse to the idea of building out a huge team and having to run that. And I'm more of a builder at heart, more of a visionary, but I wanted to automate the place as much as I could. So we ended up running the entire place with 2 part-time employees for everything, plus a small team for cleaning, which is piecework, and some landscape contractors. But through a pretty robust stack of software and smart home hardware, we were able to automate check-in, temperatures, lighting, messaging, and have very, very minimal human touch, and yet still have these very thoughtful touch points. So the welcome gift and the personalized messages and the guest book. I spent, 30 hours crafting a guest book that would give instructions for the home and tell our story in it, and just took these forgotten areas that would be even friction points sometimes, like check-in instructions, and made them fun, made them design beautifully and interesting, and fresh baked cookies on arrival for the guests, and just these little incredible pieces that came together to create that emotional connection with the guests. So it wasn't just the hardware, but you had the software component as well.
Oh, that is so good. That paints a beautiful picture right there to talk about how in depth this truly was. Most people spend months, sometimes years, just thinking about starting a business. But what if you could do it in just 10 days? That's exactly what the 10-day business launch plan is designed for. It's a step-by-step roadmap that takes you from idea to real operational business in just 10 days. Click the link in the description below and get ready with your business. I want to zoom in now and talk about how someone else gets started with something similar. Maybe not to that scale, so we could really zoom down to maybe 1 or 2 Airbnb properties or experiential properties, however you want to call it. Let's say someone's okay, I'm interested in doing something similar to here. How should they identify potential properties that would do well, something like this, where they see the potential?
Yeah. So to start with, I always give this piece of advice to everyone, no matter how big your budget is or your appetite: build less units, build fewer units, but spend more money on them. And so I love this idea of starting with like one, two, three. You don't need to build something super expansive. And just through that, you're already creating this scarcity and this exclusivity. And you're setting yourself up to just totally over deliver, because then you can just focus and concentrate your efforts both in the building and in the operations on a few premium experiences. So there's a whole range of things people can do. Go out and find 2 to 5 acres, say within 2 hours of a major metro area, call that 1 million+ people. So you're 2 hours outside, the land's a lot cheaper. There's probably a lot less red tape. Look for red states over blue states, generally speaking. Bonus points for like the deep south or places like Texas, because if you're in unincorporated parts of the county, you just have so much leeway as far as building. The downside is, of course, you don't have the high barrier to entry for competitors, but I've never been worried about that, because if you are a doer and you can execute and you have a vision, then getting to market and then building a brand around that gives you the biggest moat you'll ever need and telling your story well. So go out and find 2 to 5 acres. And ideally, trees are the number one thing, because I said invest in landscaping, but you can't just buy one of those massive live oaks I was describing. You can buy a little one, but it takes a long time for that to grow. And so if it has like mature trees, that's fantastic. That way you can create some privacy, some seclusion, and then, spend all of your budget. If you want to build 5 cabins, shrink that down and build 2 cabins and spend that entire budget on those two to make them just exceptional experiences that are unlike anything else, whether that's a tree house or an A-frame or a modern cabin like Live Oak Lake. If you want something even more budget, you could go a prefab route. There's a lot of great prefabs out there that are designed forward. Or maybe even, depending on your climate and your seasonality, you could do like a tent. Those are very low barrier to entry. And maybe that's like a minimum viable product or experience that you can create, test the concept, start getting $200-300 a night. And then with some of that cash flow, then you can invest in a more extensive unit and an experience. And then final point is, as you expand, so if you start with 2 or 3 cabins and you end up getting to 5 or 10, even at 2 or 3, you want to have a space ideally where people could have like a micro wedding or a small event, especially if you're going to have 5+ units. I cannot tell you how high the demand is for those right now. And if you're already investing in creating the setting and the vibe, then this is the easy part. Just have that space, be intentional about it, and set up those Instagrammable moments, regardless of the space, where people are just going to want to come for their event. Now you've all of a sudden layered in an entirely new demand driver, and that you can charge a premium for as an experience. So those are my biggest tips.
So talk to us, like, how did you price Live Oaks, like a room? I know you had a VIP package, and then like, what were your revenues first year and second year?
Yeah, so I mean, we use dynamic pricing. So our nights ranged from $300 a night on the low end to over $1,500 a night for some of the most expensive. And then we had an extra about $100,000 per year in addition to lodging on the experience packages, simple romance, birthday experiences, extras that we would add. And there's a whole science to dynamic pricing and doing it well, but you definitely want to employ that if you want to squeeze all the juice out of this. And, again, people are so willing to pay a premium. They're not price shopping. Also, when you're distributing through Instagram versus an OTA like Airbnb, it's much less transactional and comparison based. And so they're not scrolling past, 5 or 10 or 20 other properties and then trying to like basically price shop. They're finding you through immersive, compelling content, video content. And so it's very aspirational. It's a very kind of instantaneous, like FOMO feeling. I want to be there and I want to experience that. And so price is really not usually the first factor in a lot of these guests' purchasing behavior. And so, you can charge that premium. Our average was about $550 per night if you equaled everything out. And that went up over time too. So we probably started at around an average of around $375 and we went up to about a $550 average.
Nice. So good. And thank you for that transparency there. I really want to hit on the design piece of that, because obviously that's what you're like a master. I mean, you're mastering it all, but like a master in the design portion, because I do think you have taken a very thoughtful approach to like designing these experiences. So what are like 2 or 3 design principles you have for designing an experiential event? What are like 2 or 3 design principles?
Well, I mentioned the one about landscapes, and that really applies inside and out. So more windows to see those landscapes, more real plants inside the units, not fake stuff. It makes a huge difference. People can feel it. They're going to feel more alive. I promise you it works. I would also say be careful. This one's maybe a little contrarian, but don't go overboard when it comes to amenities. A lot of people see kind of will agree with me on the experience thing, but they don't necessarily have the taste to know how to put the pieces together. And so they'll just shotgun approach amenities, and they'll have, every imaginable game and, flashy wellness product or experience, whatever. They'll just start layering things in and basically, mini golf and this, that, and the other thing. In my opinion, those experiences if you're trying to please everyone, if you're trying to design for everyone, you're really designing for no one. I guess that's the way to say this. And so be very specific on who your avatar is. In my case, we did have a spectrum of guests, but our number one was romantic couples getaways here in Texas. And we even had, an income bracket, and we certainly had a location. They were in that Texas Triangle area. These were people that were willing to spend a premium and wanted a beautiful Instagrammable destination. And so the amenities that we added were subtle, but very thought through. And so the container pool was one of them that just made perfect sense given our climate, also given the aesthetic of the cabins. We added hot tubs, which I was actually surprised, but here in Texas, we tested it with one or two of the cabins and they crushed. We got about a $50 premium ADR. So we added those to all of them. Saunas are a big thing right now, and especially wood barrel saunas, and especially in northern climates. But yeah, avoid the amenity salad is what I'll call it, of just throwing everything you can. And again, apply that philosophy of build fewer things and spend more money to the amenities themselves, and just invest, especially in interiors. You want to have fantastic textures, tons of glass, furnishings. You got to balance durability with design, but they're both going to cost a premium for your furniture and furnishings, and appliances. It's so worth it. Custom cabinetry. We had micro kitchens in each of the cabins. And again, nothing was modular. It was all custom, and guests appreciate those little details.
Really, really good. So listeners, we've talked so far about getting started, hospitality as well. But Isaac, a super important part of your story, as you said, is making something Instagrammable. So let's dive into the marketing piece, but then we're going to dive into operations. But speaking to marketing, you grew your Instagram to 100,000 plus in a year, which is amazing. What was your approach to that? Did you use ads, influencers, something else? Was it just that Instagrammable? Talk to us about the marketing piece of that on social media.
Yeah. So the funny part is that it actually started because we got kicked off of Airbnb 2 weeks after we launched. So we had this, exhausting construction process, spend $2.3 million, launch, have a fantastic launch in Airbnb. And 2 weeks later, I wake up and the entire account is suspended, actually. It was a really, really rotten feeling. And I couldn't do anything about it. Customer service was sorry, that's a different department. It's out of our control. And so I had to get creative. And so I ended up calling a travel influencer. Someone tipped me off to this idea, but I called a travel influencer in our area. And this was really kind of a new concept at the time, especially. Paid her $950, and she ran a 2-night giveaway collaboration with me with a brand new account, whipped up a direct booking site, so we could funnel that attention to our own platform. And in 7 days, we got 40 grand of direct bookings and about 5,000 followers from scratch on a $950 giveaway. So I just was this is insane. What was potentially the end of our business, quite literally, became the biggest catalyst for growth that we could have ever engineered. It was incredible. And as fate would have it, 4 days after that giveaway concluded, Airbnb restored our account. So had that window not come, I would never have invested like I did in Instagram. And so from that moment on, Airbnb took a backseat. We went all out with these influencer collabs. And in the first 6 months, we spent about 50 grand and learned so much about who to partner with, who not to partner with, and how to structure these collabs. But that 50 grand got us our first 50-ish thousand followers and took us to about 70% direct bookings. And then at that point, we really started investing into our own content and understanding storytelling and virality, what the algorithm wanted. And then we just kind of created a machine around that and started pumping out content, one reel every other day, and grew organically to now over 200,000 followers just on Instagram, and drove 80+% of all bookings direct. So you mentioned $1 million of revenue in year one, and that's right. 80% of that's direct. $800,000 of that came through our channel, and you save 15% of commission that goes pure to your bottom line. So, 130 grand of extra profit. Plus, we had their email, so now we can retarget them with campaigns. We had guests come back 3, if not 4 times in that first year, which is also because we had an incredible experience and they wanted to bring their friends and family back. But here's the key. Word of mouth is the most valuable marketing channel that's ever existed in the history of humanity. And social media is just a megaphone for word of mouth. And so, whether that's your own content or ideally you're partnering with some influencers to jumpstart that process, you're just leveraging trust, people's trust. And you're building that trust at scale. And you can build systems around that just like you do around the actual operations while still showing up personally. Final tip on this is founder-led content is just like every other domain crushing right now in the hospitality space. So this is probably my biggest regret with Live Oak, because I didn't document the process and actually build it in public. Thankfully, I at least took some pictures, but it was after the fact that not only we started the Instagram channel for the property, but I personally started showing up and sharing the journey. I've got a friend, Devin, with the Pacific Bend. It's probably the most Instagrammable, famous Airbnb in the world. And he built this shipping container home in Washington State. He's a 24-year-old kid with an iPhone and a $20 tripod, just creating reels throughout that process. And he built 1.5 million followers in 12 months. When he launched, he was entirely booked up within like a week and a half. Now has built 2 more units and is just, the world is his playground because opportunities flood to you. And he was using himself and his story and just showing up authentically to drive that following. So massive goldmine opportunity here for storytelling.
Yeah, I want to hit on the social media piece as well. You alluded to like partnerships, doing it right, doing it wrong, storytelling, all of that stuff. I want to hit specific on the influencer because someone could have a $900 marketing budget starting. Listeners, I'm thinking of you here. And I drove $40,000 or whatnot for you. What you know now about partnering with influencers, what should people look for and what should they avoid? Let's start with what they should avoid first and then what they should look for.
Yeah, avoid the temptation that higher follower counts automatically mean it's a go. That has really very little correlation with who you should partner with. So there is pretty big science to this, and we don't have time to break it down. My simplest piece of advice is, number one, try to find other properties in your region. So that could be within a 3 or 4 hour radius of you that you admire, because now this is a pretty common marketing channel. Try to network with those owners, get some buy-in, and they're usually very happy to share. So that's the cheat code to get kind of the local list of who works and who doesn't. What you're going to learn is there is a breed of travel influencers that I've kind of seen in every single market that focuses on restaurants and experiences and now hospitality and cool places to stay, hotels, Airbnbs. That's your ideal influencer to partner with. And the best ones are worth their weight, are 100x what they charge. They're worth their weight in gold. So we spend about $3,000 to $5,000 per collaboration on 2 or 3 of those collaborations in the first 6 months that drove 80% of those results. So the first one was a great example, but whether it's $1,000 or $5,000, I haven't really seen anybody charging more than that. If you vet out that perfect one. So in our case, there's a girl named Amanda Spencer, and she has an account called Texas.Explorer. She's got over, I think, 1 million followers now. At the time, she had like 100,000, but it was just a killer following because it was the perfect avatar in our Texas Triangle market and the types of properties that people wanted and experiences. And she and the first one we did and a couple others were just by far and away the best ones. So I'd almost, if I had to do it all over again, and if I could just cherry pick those 2 or 3 or maybe 5 best influencers in your market and just do those and maybe bring them back every 6 months, allocate all of your budget to that, fantastic results.
That is a really nice breakdown. I feel like just for listeners here, like find someone in your region that fits that avatar and throw money their way here. We've hit on marketing, and I do want to hit on the operations piece of this. And let's talk about like this unsexy stuff here, the cleaning, the maintenance, guest messaging. You alluded that you had 2 part-time employees during this. I mean, what processes did you have that helped things run smoothly from the start?
Yep. So I first and foremost kind of built the entire system myself, and I did their position first to understand it and kind of build the checklists out. But the software is the most important part. So we have a property management software that's kind of the hub, and then we have different spokes. So a pricing tool, automations for messaging, for smart home hardware, which talks to, door locks and thermostats and noise monitors and lighting and all these different like hard systems. And then there's actually tools for the actual workflow automation itself. I didn't even use that. I just used simple checklists. So once I had kind of those pieces put together on the software, then I just looked for hiring the right people. And the key here is you want to hire, to use a framework from Danny Meyer, you want to hire 51%ers. And what that means is a person who's 51% a hospitality oriented, just a naturally warm, friendly, and willing to serve, eager to serve kind of personality type. You want that person. And then 49% of them is like a technical skill, whatever they're doing. And especially if you have just like a smaller team and it's a more automated process, whatever touch point you do have with the guest, whether that's somebody answering a message or a cleaner even who's on site or a maintenance person that the guest may happen to bump into, they need to be a hospitality professional. They need to really represent and be an ambassador for you as the owner. So hiring the right people is absolutely critical. And yeah, the systems, I think at the end of the day, like, of course you can't fully automate everything, but you can take out 90% of the manual work and labor of like traditional hotels and just replace that with automations and software. And then for that 10%, hire the very best people and pay them like a time and a half what they're worth, because you don't want to let go of them once you actually find them.
I love the time and a half of like what it's worth. That is really good. I want to talk about like what you can automate here compared to like a hotel. I really want to speak to that about just so listeners like know like, oh, a lot of this can be automated. Give us like 2 or 3 things that can be automated compared to like a traditional like hotel.
Yeah. So for one, we don't have any formal check-in process. It's touchless. There's no front desk. There's no concierge on site. There's no one on site except cleaners and maintenance people that are coming and going and doing their thing. So we're automatically cutting out a massive amount of overhead just with those positions. Check-in is fully automated with the instructions, with the keyless entry, lighting, thermostats, everything adjusts around when the guest is going to be there, which the property management software understands. We also don't have any food and beverage. That was a very intentional choice. So we have these micro kitchens, and a lot of guests will bring or get groceries delivered or get food delivered. But as part of the experience, another idea is like crafting meal kits or partnering with a local chef to do this and make it really fun and easy for the guests. But there's actually a lot of guests that want to do that want to cook. And if they don't, if it's like a VIP person or they're just like want to be pampered, you can partner with a local chef to just come in and cook for them. But we didn't have any on-site bar or restaurant, any kind of food. That's probably like the hardest part of any hotel, to be honest, from the operations perspective. We cut that out. An on-site commissary would be another good kind of compromise where you could kind of have like a nice variety of options, of grab and go options that you didn't really need anyone to staff. And I think just in general, like the cleaning and the maintenance staff, they're very nimble. So they're all local people, but yeah, no one's living on site. They're over there all the time. But so the 2 part-time positions I mentioned, one is a guest communications manager / cleaning manager. And her official title was like guest experience manager. So she was just in charge of the entire guest experience. She was working probably a total of about maybe 10 hours a week. Like I said, very part-time, but kind of a little bit, 5 minutes here and 20 minutes there and, answering a message here and dealing with the cleaner there. And so, I paid her kind of almost a full-time salary, even though she's only working, and that allowed her to work another job. So just so much more efficient than, again, like a whole team on site. And then the other position was maintenance manager. And so he just owned every aspect, every system on site. And so he didn't do all the work himself. He would then, call in a lawn care contractor to cut the grass and pool cleaner or whatever. But he was ultimately like the buck stops with him for any problems. And so those 2 positions work together closely. And then if you were to have a third, it would be kind of one person, a GM who's above them, a general manager. And to be completely honest, I never really gave up the reins on that when I owned it, because I was always, wanting to tweak the machine and make it even better. And that person would probably also kind of have to oversee the marketing, or at least that's a third position. But that was me. And so that was probably 5 hours a week, and I loved it. It was a great way of me staying connected and, just keeping in touch with the guest experience and keeping that connection going. And I guess I mentioned, I don't think I told you in the original story, we ended up selling Live Oak Lake a year and a half after construction was done. So a very short timeline overall. We sold for $7 million. So we built for 2.3 and sold for 7 in a year and a half later. So the value creation in a short period of time is kind of off the charts if you can nail the experience, tell the story, and build a brand. So that brand was a huge component in that valuation because it drove this huge, direct revenue. And to be honest, like these big brands at the top in the hospitality food chain don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the creativity to build these kind of followings. And so they're eager to buy properties, but not on a one-off basis. They need like a portfolio. They need a micro resort. They need a portfolio of micro resorts because they can't operate, an individual 1-unit property. There's a great case study that your listeners should check out if they haven't heard of it, called Postcard Cabins. It was formerly known as Getaway. And it's like these kind of, very, very minimal, just little cabins in the woods, 30 or 40 per property, a lower experience for sure than Live Oak Lake, but cool outdoor hospitality. And they just sold to Marriott for like several $100 million just a few months ago. So that was the first major institutional exit by a major hotel brand. But my friend Ben just sold his property. He's been on the UpFlip YouTube channel. He sold his property to a publicly traded REIT. I sold mine to a kind of light private equity group. And yeah, there's a huge demand from institutional buyers for these.
Let's lead to our Famblitz questions. And these are questions submitted from our community. Listeners, if you want to join in on world-class entrepreneurs like Isaac, go to www.youtube.com/upflip and submit your questions there. But Isaac, ready for our last 5 here?
Let's do it.
What's one hospitality hack under $50 that boosts your reviews every time?
That welcome gift, like just splurge on it and make the guests feel totally pampered and spoiled and over deliver and make it personalized. We had so many reviews that just people were blown away by that. Those fresh baked cookies.
Airbnb or direct booking, which one drives more profit for you?
Oh, direct booking all year long. 15% extra pure profit.
So good. Number 3, what's the weirdest guest request you've ever said yes to?
Oh man. I don't know if this one was that weird, but we had a couple come that wanted to propose. So they wanted us to like hire a band and like get like this whole thing going on. And so we had lots of proposals, but this one was unique because like we had a saxophone player out there. And like, again, these are all kind of, you can see all the other cabins. And so it wasn't that weird. It was kind of fun for everybody else, but everybody was kind of in on what was going on because they just chose to do it that way. And so I probably wouldn't have done that way, but what works for one person is their thing.
Number 4, if you had to start all over tomorrow with just one property, where would it be and why?
I would do something like that train car I told you. I just love restoration and love the idea that something that was so old and forgotten could be totally reimagined and restored and redeemed. And so I would find another old train car anywhere in the Midwest in flyover country where people don't really expect to have a destination. And I would be in that 2-hour zone. And I would, for a very small investment, create a world-class, one-of-a-kind destination from it.
Really good. Last one for you. One mistake that cost you money but taught you everything you needed to know.
Oh, that one's good. Probably not documenting and telling my story as I was doing it and capitalizing on those kind of eyeballs like my friend Devin did. I probably missed out on several 100,000 followers and a lot more revenue, but no complaints. Lesson learned, and my next one, I'll do it differently.
So good. Well, Isaac, I want to thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It sounds like, oh my gosh, I need to learn more about Isaac and connect with him. Where can they do so? And plug your newsletter as well.
Yeah, I'm on socials at @IsaacFrench_, and I write a weekly newsletter. I spend 4 or 5 hours writing something incredibly helpful, hopefully, for anybody who's interested in this. That takes 3 minutes to read. You can get it at isaacjfrench.com, and I'd love to have you as a reader.
Listeners, that was a great episode with Isaac French. 3 different takeaways for you. It's price times utilization. I really like that technical feedback that Isaac gave. 2, you can do what you love. You don't have to worry about monetizing as your passion. You can do something that you love and make a living off of it. 3, love this tidbit on how to find properties is view supply and demand. Just go on Zillow, find a place where it has a high supply and demand. Basically, look for those Midwestern states as well. I really like that tidbit. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, give us a subscribe wherever you are listening to your podcast. We have episodes coming out every single Monday, and we don't want you to miss a beat as you get started on your entrepreneurial venture. Isaac, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Ryan.